morning, everybody. Can those of you online hear us?
We're in the chat now.
How about now? I'm unmuting it, literally, it's put it in the chat. Okay, perfect. I think we'll have a couple more joining us along the way, but just so everybody knows, we are recording the session. It'll be made available like we do after every session through email for everybody to view if they have they want to watch it again. And we're going to do things a little bit differently this time. We don't have a full-on presentation with PowerPoint slides and all that kind of stuff. We want to treat this more like a conversation around messaging and content creation. So feel free to jump in and ask questions. Those of you online, you can either just unmute yourself and ask, or if you want to put it in the chat, I got AJ monitoring the chat. So as long as he's not talking, he'll be able to pull your questions from there. So we're going to go ahead and get started because we have a lot of stuff to cover today. We do have 2 sessions essentially crammed into one because we did not do the one in December for the holidays. So welcome everybody back. I want to thank you all for joining us again. I want to quickly recap where we've been and kind of where we're headed today. In our first session, we talked about knowing your goal, being clear on what you really want to accomplish with your communication. Then in our second session, we focused on knowing your audience and figuring out who can help you to meet that goal, knowing what matters to them. Today is where those things are really going to come together. Because once you know what you're trying to do and who you're trying to reach, the next question becomes pretty unavoidable. What are you going to say, and why should anyone care? That's what today is all about. Your message is the link between your goal and your audience. It's how you turn intention into action. And when that message isn't clear or focused, it doesn't matter how good your goal is or how well you know your audience. Things just won't land the way you hope that they do. This is why audience matters so much in message development. Different audiences hear things differently. What feels obvious to you might not be obvious to them. What motivates one group might completely miss the mark with another one. Strong communication starts when you stop thinking about what you want to say and start thinking about what your audience needs to hear. Today isn't about chasing clever taglines or catchy phrases. It's not about polishing words for the sake of it. It's about intentional communication, the right things on purpose for a reason. By the end of this session, you'll be able to pinpoint your core message, cut through that extra noise, and communicate in a way that actually reaches people. We'll also talk about content creation, because once you've got a solid message, it has to show up somewhere. And content creation isn't about doing more just to be busy or jumping on every trend. It's about being confident in what you're putting out and knowing it's intentional, aligned, and worth your audience's time. If you've ever felt like you're saying a lot but not getting much traction, today is about fixing that. Making your words work harder without making your job harder.
To get us started, I want to focus on our first section, why message power matters. Because this is where good intentions either turn into impact or fall flat. Even when we have a clear goal and we know exactly who we're trying to reach, communication can still miss the mark if the message itself isn't strong. That's because message power is where strategy actually shows up. Your message is the moment where your goal becomes visible to your audience. It's where intention turns into understanding. And if the message isn't aligned with what we want people to do, no amount of distribution, frequency, or amplification can fix it. You can post it everywhere, send it 10 times, pin it to the top, and it still won't work. Strong messages do something very specific. They make it easy for people to understand what matters and what to do next. When messages are clear, audiences don't have to work to figure out the point. When they're not, we accidentally bury the most important thing. For example, if the goal is to increase attendance, but the message leads with history, logistics, and background before any sense of urgency, we've lost the momentum. The audience may learn a lot, but they may have never got to the point where they realize they're actually supposed to show up. This matters even more because noise is the enemy. Higher education is an incredibly crowded communication environment. Students, faculty, staff, and parents are constantly overwhelmed with emails, notifications, posts, and announcements. When everything feels important, nothing stands out. That's why clarity is kindness and focus is respect. Message power isn't about saying more, it's about saying less, better. It's about choosing what truly matters and letting everything else support that point instead of competing with it. And ultimately, messages should move people. Great messages don't just explain information, they activate behavior. They help people think differently, feel confident, taking action, and reinforce trust, belonging, or motivation. They answer the unspoken question every audience is asking. Why does this matter to me right now? So the real question becomes, how do we build messages that actually do that? Let's break them down.
All right, so once we understand why message power matters, the next step is making sure your message is actually aligned. Every strong message sits at the intersection of three things: your goal, your audience, and your words. If any one of those is out of sync, communication weakens, even if the message is well written. A simple alignment check we can all use is asking, what does my audience need to know, feel, or believe to fulfill my goal? That question helps keep the message focused on outcomes, not just information. These examples are going to show that this is a simple connection between a goal, an audience, and an aligned message. The key thing to notice is that the message isn't generic. It's written for that specific audience in service of that specific goal. So for example, if the goal is to increase tutoring usage and the audience is first-year students, an aligned message isn't just saying tutoring is available. It's something like tutoring isn't a last resort. It's how successful students stay on track. That message directly addresses what first-year students often feel, hesitation or uncertainty, and reframes tutoring in a way that supports the goal. Another example, if the goal is to build faculty pride in the audience is faculty and staff, an aligned message isn't about rankings or broad institutional language. It's your work directly shapes students' success at YSU. That message reinforces value and impact, which is what matters most to that audience in service of that goal. One more example, if the goal is to boost event attendance and the audience is commuter students, an aligned message isn't just listing a time and a location. It's something like, this event fits your schedule and helps you leave campus with more than you arrive with. That message speaks directly to the needs of commuter students and respects their time and their priorities. In all three examples, the message is doing the same thing. It's not trying to say everything. It's reinforcing the goal by speaking directly to what the audience needs to hear. When your goal, your audience, and your message are aligned, communication feels clearer and more effective. It helps to stop guessing what to say and start saying what actually matters. If your message doesn't reinforce your goal, it's a distraction, even if it's well written.
So one of the most common mistakes that we make in campus communication is trying to say everything at once, but when we do that, the most important message often gets lost. So the first thing we need to do is define the core message. The core message is the one thing that we want our audience to understand or remember above everything else. It should be clear, concise, and directly tied to our goal. A helpful way to think about this is, if someone walks away remembering only one sentence, what do we want that sentence to be? Once we're clear on that core message, then we can build supporting messages around it. Supporting messages are there to add context or reinforcement, but they should never compete with the core. These might include things like logistics, background information, FAQs, testimonials, or data points. Now, all of that can be helpful, but only if it supports our main point. So if a piece of information distracts from the core message or if it pulls focus away from it, it probably doesn't belong in primary communication. A quick example of an unfocused message might sound like, join us for an event that includes speakers, activities, food, networking history, and opportunities. Let's compare that now to a focused version. That is, this event can connect you directly with employers who are hiring students like you. It's the same event, but it's a completely different impact.
The second version is clear, specific, it's memorable. But when we lead with a strong core message and let everything else support it, our communication becomes much more effective.
Right, so this next part is all about something that we all want in our communication, but often struggle to reach, and that's clarity. Powerful messages, they feel simple and really easy to understand, but that simplicity usually comes from a lot of intentional editing behind the scenes. When I'm shaping a message, I like to ask myself three really basic but really helpful questions. First one, does this sentence move the message forward? If it's not helping, it's probably distracting. Would my audience care about this right now? Not in theory, not someday, right now. And am I writing for clarity or for completeness? Completeness is tempting because we want to show everything that we know, but our audience wants clarity, not just the data dump. Those three questions alone can really help clean up a message dramatically. So moving to tone, tone isn't decoration. It's not an extra layer you can add at the end just to make something sound nice. Tone actually signals things. It signals things like respect, like credibility, like alignment. And different groups require different signals. For example, students, they respond best to a tone that's approachable and supportive and direct. Faculty and staff, they often need a tone that's respectful, collaborative, and informed. And then your external audiences, like donors or community partners or the public, they want to hear something more confident, more transparent, and mission-driven. So when our tone matches the moment and the audience, we build consistency. Consistency builds recognition, and recognition builds trust.
Okay. At this point, we've done the hard thinking that most communication skips right over. We've made decisions instead of assumptions. We've slowed down long enough to get clear. And that matters more than most people realize. Now we're standing at a natural turning point. Once we're confident in what we're trying to communicate, the next question isn't if you should create content, it's how that message should show up. This is where things shift from planning to practice. Think of your message as the anchor. Content is everything that's attached to it. When those two things are working together, communication feels steady and intentional. When they're not, content starts to feel scattered, like you're doing a lot, but not necessarily moving anything forward. This is often where our efforts start to drift, not because we were wrong with our messaging or we were wrong with our audience choice, but because execution loses focus. The message stays solid, but the content starts pulling in all different directions. Content is where your strategy becomes real. It's the things people actually see, they read, they click on, or engage with. It's how your audience experiences your work, whether that's through an email, a social post, a web page, a flyer, video. That's why creating the content, how to create the content correctly matters. It's not about filling calendars or checking boxes. It's about choosing the format and approaches that reinforce your message instead of competing with it. When the content truly supports the message that's behind it, it feels calm instead of chaotic. It's clear instead of cluttered. And it gives your audience something they can understand, trust, and act on. That's the shift we're looking to make, moving from what we want to say to how we bring it to life. So let's talk about why content creation matters so much and why it's also one of the most misunderstood parts of communication. Content is the most visible piece of what we do. It's the part people are actually going to see. They're going to read it, click on it, scroll past it. And because it's so visible, it's often mistaken for the strategy itself. But the content isn't the strategy, it's the delivery vehicle. A post is not a goal. A video is not the goal. A newsletter is not the goal. Those are just ways that your message shows up. The goal is the outcome you're trying to achieve: awareness, understanding, action, trust. And that goal should always be what shapes the content, not the other way around. One of the biggest pressures we face, especially on campus, is the idea that we need to constantly be producing more posts, more emails, more of everything. But more content does not automatically mean better communication. Volume does not equal value. Putting out more does not mean people are more informed, more engaged, or more motivated. In fact, the opposite is often true. Think about how many times you hear someone on campus complain about the number of emails they receive. When everything is sent with importance, nothing will feel important. Quality communication will beat quantity every time, especially when people's attention is limited. Something to remember, our audience doesn't owe us their attention. It's our job to make sure that our content earns that attention. So how does content earn attention? First, it has to be relevant. Relevance answers a very simple question. Why should this matter to this audience? Relevant content is audience-centered, not organization-centered. It reflects what your audience needs to know right now, not just what you want to say. Ask yourself, does this connect to their role, their experience, their goals? Would this feel meaningful if I were on the receiving end of this communication? Is this clearly tied to their world, not just ours? There's a big difference between saying, here's an update on policy changes, and saying, here's how this policy change affects your registration this semester. If your audience has to work to figure out why something matters, relevance is already lost. Next, content has to be timely. Timeliness isn't about what you're saying, it's about when it shows up. Even good content can fail if it arrives too early or too late. Timely content respects where the audience is in their process, what they're thinking about, or preparing for, or deciding on right now. Ask yourself, is this the right moment for this message? Does it line up with academic calendars, deadlines? Are we anticipating needs or reacting after the moment has passed? Promoting and advising after registration closes isn't exactly helpful. Promoting it before students begin course selection is. Timely content feels helpful. Untimely content feels annoying. Or worse, invisible, and is completely unsuccessful. Then there's usefulness. This is about value. What does the audience actually gain from this communication? Useful content reduces confusion. It answers questions. It makes next steps clearer. It helps people do something more easily or more with more confidence. Ask yourself, does this help someone make a decision or take action? Are we offering clarity, not just information? Would someone save this, reference it, or act upon it? There's a big difference between 5 paragraphs explaining a process and 3 clear steps someone needs to complete by Friday. If content doesn't help the audience do something, it quickly turns into noise and the message gets lost. Finally, content needs to be authentic, because authenticity is how trust is built. Authentic content sounds human. It feels honest. It reflects real experiences, not just polished language. It sounds like you, not a generic institution. So ask yourself, does this sound like a real person or a press release? Are we using real voices, stories, or perspectives where we can? Are we being honest about challenges and not just highlighting wins? Compare, our institution is committed to excellence and innovation with, here's how a student navigated a challenge and what helped them succeed. People trust what feels real, and that trust builds credibility over time. At the end of the day, content should always serve a purpose. If it doesn't clearly support your message, your audience, and your goal, it doesn't add value. It just adds noise. And the goal of good communication is never noise. It's clarity, trust, action, and purpose-driven.
Okay, so the most important idea I'm going to talk about next is that every piece of content should have a job. And before we talk about format, platforms, or production value, you have to be able to answer one question clearly: what is this content supposed to do? When content tries to do everything, explain, persuade, reassure, and convert all at once, it usually does none of those things well. Purpose-driven content is focused, it knows what lane it's in, and it stays there. Naming the purpose does something powerful. It gives you permission to leave things out. A lot of bloated content isn't bloated because we don't know what to say. It's bloated because we're afraid to not say something. When you name the purpose, editing becomes easier, decisions become clearer, and the audience feels that clarity immediately. All right, so there's 5 content purpose categories I'm going to kind of go through here. Informing content exists to close a knowledge gap. Its job is not to persuade, motivate, or sell. Its job is to keep the audience understanding something they didn't understand before. This kind of content prioritizes accuracy, clarity, and plain language. It assumes confusion is possible and designs around it. Best moment to use it would be in a policy change, a process explanation, new programs, service overviews. Anytime accuracy matters more than urgency. Informing content fails when we overload with detail, rely on insider language, or assume background knowledge the audience doesn't have. Informing content works when someone walks away thinking, oh, I get it now. Motivating content exists to create movement. This is the content you use when people already know something exists, but they're not acting on it yet. Motivating content highlights value, urgency, and relevance. It makes the benefit feel immediate and personal. Best moments to use include events, involvement opportunities, campaigns, applications, anywhere you need energy and buy-in. Motivating content falls flat when next steps are vague, when we hype without substance, or we assume people are naturally motivated. Motivating content answers the question, why should I care enough to act right now? Reinforcing content is about relationship, not action. Its purpose is to strengthen trust, confidence, and connection over time. This content reflects values, highlights real people, and affirms identity. It helps audiences feel seen and valued. This is best used in student success stories, faculty achievements, community impacts, milestones, and recognitions. Reinforcing content can slip into self-congratulatory if it loses the audience lens or becomes too internally focused. Success signals include reinforcing content that works when it strengthens the bond, not when it tries to sell something. Support content exists to make things easier. It's not about convincing someone to do something new, it's about helping them successfully do what's already expected. Support content is practical, reassuring, and action-oriented. It anticipates questions before they're asked. This is best used in complex processes, high-stress moments, deadlines, onboarding, registration, or transitions. Support content fails when we over-explain, use institutional language instead of human language, or bury the key action. Support content succeeds when fewer people need to ask follow-up questions. And then finally, conversion content is finish line content. By the time someone reaches this content, they're informed and motivated. This content's job is to make the next step unmistakably clear. Conversion content is focused, direct, and friction reducing. It tells people exactly what to do and how. This is best used for applications, deposits, appointment scheduling, form submissions, or RSVPs. Conversion content fails when we ask for far too much, include competing calls to action, or lack urgency. Conversion content works when the next step feels obvious and easy. Here's the simplest readiness test for content. If you can't name its purpose, it isn't ready. Unclear purpose leads to unclear messaging, and unclear messaging leads to inaction. Before finalizing content, ask realignment questions. How does it support my goal? Which audience is this for? And what should change because someone consumed it? Purpose-driven content feels intentional, not obligatory. It respects the audience's time and attention.
So once we've clearly defined the purpose of our content, what it's supposed to do, the next question becomes, does it actually connect with the people we're creating it for? That brings us to our next section, audience connection, making content feel personal. Even the strongest messages can fall flat if they don't connect with the audience. You can say the right thing in the right way and still miss if it doesn't resonate with the people actually experience information. That's why audience connection goes beyond simply knowing who you're talking to. Most of the time, we already have that part figured out. The most important question is how they encounter and engage with the content. How do you actually experience what you're putting out into the world? Where do you see it? How much time do they realistically have? What tone do they trust? And what formats feel natural instead of forced or disruptive? When we start asking those questions, our messages get sharper and more effective. For students, connection often means content that's short, visible, mobile friendly, and direct. They're scrolling quickly, multitasking constantly and deciding in seconds whether something is worth their attention. For faculty and staff, connection looks different. They value clear context, respect for their time, and credibility. They want us to understand the why, not just the what, and they want information they can trust. For parents and community members, connection often comes through reassurance and clarity. They're looking for outcomes, impact, and confidence that things are being handled well. It's important to remember connection isn't about dumbing things down. It's about meeting people where they are. When content feels personal, relevant, and respectful, audiences are far more likely to engage and to act.
So now let's talk about something that sounds simple but can be surprisingly hard to practice, and that's quality over quantity. In the world of content, it's always better to create one strong, purposeful piece of content over 5 short, focused ones. And honestly, most of us already know that, but we just don't always give ourselves the permission to slow down and prioritize that quality. So let's start with some red flags. Signs that the content probably isn't doing the job that you hope it will. Sometimes content is created simply because, quote, we always do this. That's a tradition, not a strategy. Or it repeats information just for the sake of filling space, without adding anything new or helpful. Another warning sign is when a message tries to say too much at once. When everything is important, nothing stands out, as you've heard. And the audience usually disconnects at that point. And then there's the classic content that feels generic or interchangeable. If you could swap out the logo and nothing would change, then there's nothing. On the other hand, high quality content is actually pretty easy to recognize. It has a clear purpose. You know exactly why it exists. It has a focused message, which, one idea that's delivered well. It's relevant to the audience, not just relevant to you, the creator. It's easy to understand. There's no guesswork required. And it's easy to act on. The next step for the viewer is obvious. When those 5 things are true, your content is working for you, not against you. At the end of the day, strong content is a form of respect. It says we value your time and we're not going to waste it. So instead of asking what can we post, which usually leads to filler content, we ask what content would actually help right now. That one shift changes everything, and it leads to content that's more intentional, more strategic, and ultimately more impactful.
Another important piece of effective communication is where our content actually comes from. So some of the best content that we could possibly share, it already exists. We just have to recognize it. We don't always need to create something brand new from scratch. We have to think about the sources that we have around us every day, such as student stories, faculty insights, staff expertise, real lived experiences, and even questions that were asked over and over again. So all of those are valuable content sources. When we use these kinds of authentic voices, our messaging is building trust. So it feels real because it is real. And it's not manufactured, it's not overly polished. But the good news is content doesn't need to be perfectly produced perfectly to be effective. But what matters far more is the clarity and the honesty. So when our communication reflects real experiences and real people, it's going to resonate more, and it's much more likely to connect with your audience.
As we finish up, I want to take a minute and just kind of recap. Effective communication isn't random. It's sequential. Each step builds on the one before it. It starts with our goal. Next comes the audience. Then our message will create the meaning, and our content is going to deliver that meaning. At the end of the day, your audience is going to decide whether any of it matters. They decide whether to pay attention, whether to trust it, or whether to act. When any one of these pieces is missing or unclear, the goal, the audience, the message, or the content, the entire effort is weakened. Communication doesn't fail because people aren't working hard enough. It fails because one of these steps gets skipped or brushed. And that's why success in communication isn't measured by how many words you wrote, how many posts you published, or how busy you felt at the end of the day. Activity is not the same as impact. real success is going to look a little bit different. It's going to be measured by whether your message was understood, whether your content actually resonated with your audience, and whether something changed because of it. A decision, a behavior, a next step, or even just clarity where there might have been confusion before. I'm going to follow everybody else and give you 3 questions to ask yourself to keep in mind before you create or share your content. Before you hit send, post, publish, pause and ask yourself these 3 questions. 1, is my message clear and focused? 2, does this content truly support the message? And 3, is this worth my audience attention right now? If the answer to any of these is no, or even I'm not sure, that's your cue to pause, refine, or simplify. That moment of pause can make the difference between content that adds value and content that just adds noise. When your message is intentional and your content is aligned, communication stops feeling reactive, becomes more confident and more strategic, and a lot more effective. That's when you move from just communicating to actually making an impact. The next challenge is making sure that our content shows up in the right places at the right times and through the right channels. Even the strongest message and the best content won't work if no one sees it or if it shows up where it doesn't belong. That's where our next session is going to come in. Beyond Facebook, expanding your reach, we're going to take a look at where content lives and whether those choices are actually helping us reach the people we're trying to reach. Too often, we just default to a single platform without asking if it's the right one for our goal or the audience. If I had $1 for every time someone said to me, I didn't see that on social media, and what they really meant was, I didn't see that on Facebook, or another favorite, just put it on the website somewhere. I'm going to retire. So we're going to talk about moving beyond a one-channel mindset and thinking more strategically about how communication, marketing, social media, print, and web platforms all work together as an ecosystem, each with a purpose and each playing a role. We hope that you're going to walk away with tools to evaluate which channels truly support your goals, spot over-reliance or gaps in your current approach, and make smarter decisions about how to expand your reach without spreading yourself too thin. Because at the end of the day, the right message in the right place really will make the difference. We're also going to be offering some social media audits for any of you who have social media channels within your areas. So pay attention to that when you register. We're going to ask you to register for the session as well as register for social media audit. Garrett and Sammy will be conducting those audits and then setting up individual meetings with your areas to go over those. Anybody have any questions?
This was phenomenal. When's the next one?
Well, that was what I was going to end with. So thank you. We hope that we'll see you all at our next session, which is on Wednesday, February 25th. And we'll be sending out our newsletter like we do within a couple of days with this video, as well as the way to register for our next session. All right.
I have some questions.
Please.
How important are subject lines in all of this?
Very. That's what the first opportunity for for you to catch their attention.
Right.
And that's part of what we'll talk about when we get to the channels as well. But it's part of your message, right? And that's where you want your key point to be. What the biggest takeaway? Because there's sometimes that people are only going to see your subject.
Right. If they don't if that doesn't catch them, they're not open to even read your content.
Correct.
I've also read like shorter subject line versus longer, so I didn't know if you had any.
Yeah. At the end of the day, when you look at it and you say, I would never open an email that had this as a subject line, or I have no clue what the content of this email is, then your subject line is going to fail.
Right.
Another suggestion, especially with you guys, what I would recommend in admissions is you've got student workers, right? You've got student employees, ask them.
Yeah.
Because that's who your audience is, right?
Yeah.
Go to them and say, if you see this subject line, are you going to open it? My answers are going to go, no. Email. Yes. And that's, I mean, we have the resources, right? We have them here at our fingertips. We have to use them. Because we may think one thing, but we're not the audience. So we have to make sure that we're keeping our audience in mind when we're doing that. And don't think that you have to put Youngstown State University, It's already going to be in the from, right? It's in the address. That's all there. It doesn't have to be in your subject line. Sometimes you don't have a choice. But at the end of the day, you need to make sure that it's something that's going to catch people's attention. And I would come up with 2 or 3 of them and test them with your students, with your staff, and see what everybody thinks. But yeah, you want to catch it and utilize, if you have the opportunity, that pre-header text, which is kind of that second line that shows up. If you don't do it, most email services will just pull the first line of text of your email.
Yeah.
And that might confuse people because that's not necessarily going to be the
An opening sentence.
correct.
Yeah.
So if you have the ability to preset that pre-header text, use it, do it. Because that's going to be something else that helps support the importance of opening an email.
Luckily with our CRM too, we can bring in merge fields. We'll bring in first name and subject line and stuff, so it catches their attention there.
So be careful using it too much, because then it becomes less novelty and more like, oh, this happens every time I get an email.
Yeah.
So I would be intentional in your use of it. If it's just the generic, hey, we have this thing, email, maybe don't use it there, but maybe if it's like, actually join us for Penguin Preview Day on, something like that, then you're going to catch their attention. But if you use it too much, then you lose the effectiveness of it.
I'll say this too, because this happens to me a lot. Like, I don't know how your CRM handles the data, but like, I'll get emails that say like, hey, did you do this thing? And it changes lowercase because it doesn't assume it's going to, I capitalize it.
Make
So
sure you're.
and when I see that, I'm like, it's just a one go. Like, and then immediately I'm checked out.
And it'll take either their preferred nickname or first name, and however it is in that field it's written. So,
That's good, yeah.
Yeah. And make sure that you have a filler in case you have an empty field,
yes.
that it doesn't just like read blank.
Or
to
say
this.
first name.
Or say, yes. Yes, because you can do that in Emma too, and that's one of the things we talk about in training. You aren't 100%, 1000% sure that your list has a first name for everybody, then you need to put something in there that's gonna, so like in Emma, we usually say, dear fellow penguin,
Right.
put that into something that, as a
We can't have
placeholder.
a contact without a first name.
Okay, so you guys are clear, but
But yeah,
Yeah.
I've seen that in Emma where it says or.
personalization is wonderful as long as you do it right.
I'll probably contribute a little bit of that, less about Emma as a platform and more about just email subjects in general. As a graduate student, I get like tons and tons and tons of emails every day, to the point where I'm done scrolling, I just go right for the search bar. So if you have, a unique subject line that has key searchable terms that allow me to come back to it every time that message is relevant, it's easier for me to not only, recognize this is for me, but figure out how to get back to it when I know that I need that information.
Yeah.
It's a good point. Hey, Mark?
I can hear more.
Good.
And there's probably not an exact answer to this.
No.
When you talk about quality over quantity, what is the right number for social media? Because I know you have to have enough to keep people engaged in your channel, but what's the sweet spot? Is there a sweet spot?
So it totally depends. And it can be based on a lot of your metrics track that you should be able to do through your platforms. Generally what we try to do on our main pages, we generally put out 5 to 6 posts a week. But it's different for you guys over in admissions, your prospective students that you guys are targeting. They might not be looking for something every day on their feed from you. They might be like that might almost grow redundant. So I would say I think along with the next CCN, if you want to partake in that audit thing that we're talking about, we can actually do a deeper dive with you and kind of hammer down exactly what that number might be. But yeah, like I said, it all depends.
And I think part of it is keeping in mind a lot of what we talked about today, making sure that what you're posting matters to your audience.
Right.
So it's not just about throwing up 5 posts to say that I put up 5 posts. Because if they start seeing content from you that is like, this has nothing to do, I'm not looking for this, they're going to stop paying attention. So even if it gets to them, they're going to ignore it. So, it's that fine line between enough and actual like real content that is relevant to your audience. So that's where kind of those one-on-ones I think are going to come in handy, because we all have different audiences, different needs, different messaging. So that's where, I don't know if they're real happy with me with saying audits, because there's two of them, but depending on how many sign up, but I think it's gonna be really good for the people, for the areas across campus that have social media and stuff.
And that's another thing you can talk to your student workers too. You can ask them, they were looking for schools when they were, in the college decision making process, at what point did it become annoying to them to see, too much stuff on their feed about the.
What other institutions, they also felt did a good job or poor job.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're not looking at competitors enough.
Right, yeah.
They're not just seeing us, they're looking at anybody else they've applied to, so.
Okay.
I would say algorithm wise, I would not do less than like the 2 a week though, because if you're not posting at least one time a week, you're losing, you're losing out.
Okay.
You kind of mentioned the timeliness of content, so usually for Penguin Preview Days, we start advertising like 5 weeks out. Wondering if you all have found like a sweet spot in that, like what's too far in advance, what's too soon. Obviously, you'll want to try and advertise an event it's next week. That's not enough notice. I'm curious.
That's
2 months out seems like that's
Yes.
too long. So like, what's the sweet spot there? If you all have an idea.
I think it depends, right? That's always the answer. It depends what's going on kind of around the event. Like this February Penguin Preview Day, you can't start too soon because now you're hitting the holidays. No one's paying attention. They're in the holiday mode. But when you're talking about the June one, and you're bumping up against at the end of the school year for these kids, that one like maybe does get a little more room to breathe further out because kids are starting to plan their summer and making final decisions for school. So you want to be in that kind of conversation.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, the same thing with just thinking of other admission related events. If you have multiple events that are separate but in the same wheelhouse, you don't want them stepping on each other's toes, so you got to work with that as well. So it really is just a matter of looking at both your internal event calendar and just kind of the wide world calendar to kind of figure out where does this make the most sense.
I'm thinking too, I mean, when you said 5 weeks out, that's when you guys start your push, right?
Yes.
But it's on the website a year in advance. You've got,
Not a year, but
Not a year, but-
usually, yeah. Like as soon as the one ends, we open.
next
you
one.
open the next one. So you have the dates and stuff, it's available, it's out there.
Yeah.
So you can do some soft kind of launches of it, you can put something on social media, you could do, and then kind of build into that. So that's where you're looking at different content for different purposes.
Yeah.
So, at 5 weeks, we're gonna start our email campaign because that's how we're gonna give them the link right in their inbox. That's where we see a lot. But you can softly get those dates out there in other ways.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Depends on your reach too. So like if you're going further out, you need to give more time for planning purposes, for hotels, all of that.
Yeah.
So it just
And
depends.
maybe you split your audience. Maybe you look at your geographic footprint and your audience is further away, they get a little bit of an earlier,
Yeah, that's interesting.
you start a little bit earlier with them because they have to make more travel plans. They have to, where your backlog audience may not need that amount of time and may forget about your event and it gets lost. So, there's different ways to do it. And honestly, some of it is just trying and seeing. You may find that works really well for Penguin Preview Days and is awful for something else.
Yeah.
And it's just, you're at the end of the day, your audience is going to decide if what you're doing works for them.
It's all the questions I have.
Okay.
Those are really
I
good
like
questions.
that.
Look, it's the gold star.
We're not going to lock you in. He's very good.
Good job, everybody.
Anybody else have any questions?
I mean, I guess I don't even know how to put this question. Michelle and I apparently work with very difficult audiences. Because we're not reaching students, we're trying to reach educators in the schools, like K through 12 schools and superintendents. And when I've literally had them tell me, when my subject line was $4,000 scholarship for your students, and they tell me, well, why should I open it? I mean, what do you do? What do you do about that? So I mean, I know we're talking about content probably more so in
No, but
campaigns and stuff, but that's a really big struggle for us because that's who a lot of the times we are trying to reach to get them to do our programming. It's not the students, but the teachers and the staff at the schools. And we are really struggling because, I mean, they're not just, and maybe admissions too, but you guys have more of like a very set, like we come in, we do our thing, and the schools are used to that. But, you know, if they're getting emails from us and Kent and Akron and Cleveland, and they're like, why should I bother with your programming? You know, so, and we don't have to answer all those questions now, but maybe, I never thought of setting up a meeting with you guys about that part of it.
Yeah, and part of it may be finding out what their priorities are.
Yeah.
Because if their priority is
It's not $4,000.
to get a $4,000 to provide information on a scholarship for their students, why?
Yes.
You know what I mean? So figuring out that, and I know that's not easy, it's not gonna be easy. And you do have a unique audience. But it may be different per school district, which is, yes, it may very well be. Because, you know, each school district is gonna have different priorities if they're focused on STEM or they're focused on the arts, or, you know, there's different things within the schools. So it may be, you know, if you got somebody that tells you that, why should I open this email? Then ask, what would get you to open this email? What kind of content are you looking for from us?
Yeah.
How can we help you?
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, if they feel like we're helping them or we're doing something for them, they may be more inclined. So it may just be kind of restructuring
individual emails.
restructuring that message or restructuring the way we word it, the words that we choose. I say it all the time in the office, words matter.
Yeah.
So the tone, we talked about the tone today.
Is the president still like, is he still doing those school visits that he was, I know he was trying to do.
I don't know.
That would be something interesting to, he's bringing the superintendent in.
Yeah, so,
Or Lori.
yeah, she's actually right next door right now. So she might be somebody to talk to about getting at least that information. You can share that information with the superintendents. They can start looking for those things from you.
Yeah.
But they may actually be able to give some feedback as well as to what they need. Because if we're supplying X and they need Y, there's no meeting in the middle.
And every school literally is different.
And that's the problem, right? You gotta find some way to manipulate it a little bit and kind of meet everybody, because we can't serve individual needs across the board. But to be able to kind of take those and like put them in buckets maybe as to what, you know, all of these kind of fall into this one category. Here's how we can do that.
I also feel like educators, the common thread that they might share is time.
Oh,
They want the fast track.
Yeah.
So yeah, happy to sit down and.
And it's not that it's not like we overload them. I mean, we don't send them like a ton of messages or anything like that, but.
No, but
we don't get a lot of traction.
And it may be more about, here's how we're gonna save you time, or here's how, you know, what we're doing is gonna make your life easier. Rather than saying, we're offering this, we're telling them, we're gonna make your life easier, we're gonna do this for you. So again, you're same content, different messaging, so. Anybody else? I love questions.
Feedback on refining emails, I have a sort of question. Yesterday I sent an email to New York City alumni to encourage them to attend a reception with the Student Investment Fund. And so I wrote it and I put it in ChatGPT to try and get rid of some of the fluff. Because I think they can get more fluffing.
I like that.
Yeah, get rid of the fluff. It's more concise, but then, you know, I'm hearing, I think it could even be a little bit more concise. I have an opening sentence that's like, come to do this, this, and this. And so that might be a little too long. And then it was mentioned about real voices. So maybe the next email that I send out for this, I could have a photo of one of the chapter leaders was just a quote saying, this is why you should come and why he's had benefit from it.
Yeah.
What maybe a photo from the last event. But I was wondering if somebody could audit this particular email and just, you know, critique it, let me know if you can send it to me.
Yeah, we're happy to do that kind of stuff. Sometimes it doesn't happen quickly. We can be completely honest. You know, there's only so many, and I know everybody's the same way. There's only so many hours in the day, but we will definitely take a look at it and hopefully offer some suggestions and some guidance where we can.
It got a good open rate. I think it was 37.5% or something.
Okay, so to get open rate.
But still, every time I come here, there's some other good ideas, you know, that could make that.
Well, and here's my question to you. What was the goal of that communication?
To get people to attend the events.
So what was your click rate on the arts?
Well, that part was good.
And so at the end of the day, they got the information, but they didn't do anything with it when our goal was to get them to do something with it. So then what we have to do is we have to look at the messaging and say, okay, so maybe we were more informing with our message rather than, like AJ said, is it upfront? I think it was AJ. Yeah. Is it upfront as far as what you want them to do? It's like, if somebody reads your entire message and they walk away remembering one sentence, is it the sentence you wanted them to remember? Or is it they pick something else out of it? So like that's what we have to start doing, is making sure that what we want them to remember is the biggest point. And when I say the biggest point, I don't mean the biggest font. Let's not make that bold and make it like 25 points. What I mean is that it's very clear. This is what this communication is about. It's almost like it's your headline, not actually a headline, but it's, when you're looking at a news story, you see, or you're online, you see headlines for news stories. That's what you remember, right? You don't remember everything else. So if you're getting that across clearly, then you're going to have more success.
And I also wonder if it's a question of timing too, because this event's not till March 19th. So you want people to have it on their calendars, but they're not ready. They don't know what they're doing.
So that's where instead of doing one communication and you just keep resending multiple times, we started to save the date where we're not asking them to click on anything. Now we're informing. Here's a save the date. I'm not asking you to RSVP yet. We'll get there in a couple of weeks, but here's a save the date. And here's where maybe you use the point of view from, the chapter leader. This is why it's important. This is why it's a great event. Come meet our student, something along those lines. It's more informative. And then you follow that up the next time. So you're building a campaign instead of one. We do this all the time. We do it too. It's about time, right? You create an email, you put everything in it, you send it out, and then you just copy it. Duplicate, resend. Duplicate, resend. So we have to get away from that if we really want to encourage action and response. Because if I open it up and I see it's the same exact content, I'm just going to hit delete. And so, what we want to start doing is that first kind of, especially when you have time and you're planning ahead, to do that save the date, hold the date. So now we're looking at our open rate. Okay, almost 40% of my audience saw this. That's a success. Now, next time, do we see that same type of open rate? And then do we see them actually clicking? You're wrong.
I would give them multiple opportunities to click too.
Oh, yes.
Don't just put it at the end.
Yeah. Yeah. But use a button, use the text, make the text a link. You've got however much content, utilize it. Anybody else? Okay. Well, if you think of anything, feel free to email us. Do we have anybody on? Okay. Feel free to email us, call us, stop by. We're here. This is the fun part for me anyways. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.